Hello, and today we're going to be having a look at a completely free-to-play Salamangreat deck using 3 copies of the structure deck. So we are. Now, before anyone flips out, yes, we did craft the Lingarebo, and yes, we did put it in. You can remove that all you want. This is only here for the Decode Talker Heat Soul, which I'll talk about briefly. But basically, this deck is using strictly cards from the structure deck, 1500 gems. You can put this together, and it is astoundingly powerful. I was really honestly very surprised, because whenever I initially had built this deck, I looked at the extra deck. I'm just like, our biggest attack is 2300, and we didn't have a lot of spot removal, we didn't have a lot of negates, so we were sort of wondering like, well, how do we make this actually work? And we devised a strategy basically around the trap cards, specifically sort of abusing them and using the consistency and the recursion of your Salamangreat cards to grind out your opponent and sort of win the long game as opposed to winning the short game. And I'll be honest, it has been really powerful. I was very, very pleasantly surprised by this deck, and it continues to surprise me as well. You always feel like the underdog, so whenever you win, it feels 10 times as good. So I'm not going to go through all like the combos and stuff now. I want you to watch the gameplay, and then I want you to see there'll be a full deck breakdown at the end, and we're going to talk about some of the combos. But I'm going to do it at the end, because if I talk about it now, if you haven't played Salamangreats before, it's not going to make any sense to you. So watch it first, get a visual guide on like what's going on, and then at the end, whenever you're listening to the deck profile, everything will just make a little bit more sense, basically. So this Lingarebo that we added in, why is this guy here? Well, we added in Lingarebo specifically for Decode Talker Heat Soul. It'd be a shame not to be able to abuse one of the coolest new monsters out of the structure deck. So this guy requires 2 Cyber monsters with different attributes. Now, do you need Lingarebo to summon him? Absolutely not. You have your one-time passcode, you have your Lady Debug, and you have your Grid Sweeper, all of which will facilitate the summoning of your Decode Talker. But you're not always going to have one of those 7 cards, and if you don't have the Decode Talker Heat Soul, you struggle to get over bigger monsters unless you're utilizing the effect of the Heat Leo. But the Heat Soul makes it significantly easier to get over bigger threats, and if they summon a big monster in defense, which you'll see in the gameplay, it's very difficult to get over if you didn't go into your Heat Soul. So the Lingarebo just makes it that little bit more consistent. You can summon out the Lingarebo whenever you want off of any of your Salamangreats, so it means that at any stage, so long as you have 2 monsters on the field, you can start going into your Heat Soul. Just makes it that bit easier. But yes, we're going to get into the gameplay here in a second. If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and you might as well. We're getting very close to our target for 1,000 subscribers here. Considering we started in March, I think we're doing pretty damn good. I really appreciate anyone who has subscribed and who has been, liking and commenting all throughout this time. It really has been amazing, and if anyone wants to join in on that, the invitation is there. It doesn't cost you anything. And leave down below what you think about this deck. If you have been playing Salamangreats, what would you change about it? Of course, remember, this is a free-to-play version. So if you're talking about using optimized Salamangreats, which we went against in the gameplay, let me know what it is you do, what it is you change, and how the gameplay of the deck actually changes in your version. So without further ado, let's get into game number 1. Alright, getting into game 1 here. We're going first, and we have a very solid hand, Signet Mining here, ditching one of our Salamangreat Roars to the graveyard. Now, why do we not discard Spinny? Roar has a secondary effect that says whenever you link summon a Salamangreat monster, you can set Salamangreat Roar from your graveyard back onto your field, which is real handy. Gonna grab the Buffalo. You could also grab Lady Debug, either or. Gonna go into the Baylinks here. Baylinks will grab us the field spell. Buffalo, of course, grabbing us 2 additional cards so long as we discard the Spinny, and Spinny can summon itself from the grave, so we're not losing any value there. We draw into Double Will of the Salamangreat, which is a good card, but drawing 2 of it is a bit of a pain. We're going to use our Circle to go into Gazelle here. Gazelle, of course, being our main starter. Special summon out the Spinny. Then we're going to link summon into our Sunlight Wolf, which is going to trigger the Gazelle to summon itself to the zone Sunlight Wolf points to. Sunlight Wolf then will add a fire monster from our graveyard back to our hand, and Gazelle will send a Salamangreat card from deck to graveyard, so we send the Salamangreat Roar, and then we're going to add the Buffalo from our graveyard back to our hand. Now we're going to use the Sanctuary to summon out the Sunlight Wolf here again, so that now we can use its effect to set the add the rage back to our hand. Then we're going to link into Lingeribo here. Now we do slightly misplay here. We go into the Deco Talker Heat Soul, which is a phenomenal card. The only thing is Salamangreat Rage, because we no longer have a Link monster that was summoned using something of the same name. We no longer get this secondary effect, which is more powerful. We still have the first effect though, so it's still a live card. It's just something that maybe we didn't think too much about at the time. We're going to summon out the Sunlight Wolf here and use these two to go into Heat Leo. This is where we realize that the Sanctuary is once per turn, but we still have some plays going on here. So our opponent's going to go into Marincess Pascalis. We're going to negate that right away. The only reason we're negating that right away is because Marincess, it's just a deck of one-card combos, and I don't really want to get them going. I thought if I stop them early, they're not going to be able to do anything. Our opponent had evenly matched anyway, so we were cooked. There was nothing we could have done about that, so whether or not we played correctly into the rage was irrelevant at this point. But it is worth noting that the trap card that we activated, we made sure to activate the one we did not set from the graveyard because it would have been banished, so we still have Roar in the grave for our next turn. Marincess Dive here is going to resummon the Pascalis and allow him to link summon into the Sea Angel. Sea Angel, of course, grabbing him another Marincess Dive, which I thought was a pretty interesting decision. I assumed at that point he must already have the trap card in hand. He's going to summon out the Spring Girl to link summon into Splash Mage here. Splash Mage will revive the Spring Girl from the graveyard and link summon yet again into the Coral Anemone. So Spring Girl then basically going to grab the Battle Ocean straight from the deck, and the Splash Mage is then coming back from the graveyard to go into the Argonaut. So this is basically the new boss monster of Marincess. It's a Link 4 that allows them to negate spells or trap cards basically, which is pretty strong. It's also going to get boosted up here quite heavily by the field spell. So the field spell is going to equip onto this Link monsters from the graveyard. It's going to gain attack points equal to their attack points. So now it's pretty big. We're dealing with a pretty big monster. They're not going to swing here. I can't remember the reason behind them not swinging. I'm not sure if they locked themselves out of attacking or something, but they didn't swing, so that's fine. Main phase 1, we have Will of the Salamangreat. We may as well use it. We're going to normal summon the Buffalo first to link into the Baylynx. Baylynx then searches for another copy of the field spell. That's why we play 2. And Buffalo then discard 1 to draw 2. So ditch the Lady Debug, draw 2. We into another Lady Debug and a Foxy, which isn't the greatest of pairs considering they're both good normal summons. We're going to use our Sanctuary now to basically link our Heat Leo into itself. Now we're going to activate its effect here to bounce this card back to hand. So that means we're going to be reducing the attack points of the Argonaut, which is good. So that's it, gone. Will of the Salamangreats now is going to activate, but our opponent is going to negate it, which is fine. We don't really mind that because it again reduces the attack points of their monster, but that's grand. Heat Leo then is going to, what it does is it targets a monster in the field, it changes its attack points to match the attack points of a monster in the graveyard. It has to have been summoned using itself as material for that effect to take place. That's why we did that. So we're going to swing into his monster now, take it out. I guess he didn't have the Marincess Wave for some reason. The Sea Angel, unfortunately, we can't get rid of at this stage. He's got the Spring Girl in hand, and again, that's the thing about Marincess. It's just one card combos left, right, and center. So we're going to go into the Blue Slug. Spring Girl, of course, is going to trigger yet again. It's going to send Max C from the top of the deck to the graveyard, so our opponent doesn't get much out of that. Spring Girl then adds itself back to hand and can summon itself again. Spring Girl just adding a lot of consistency to Marincess by just constantly summoning itself. Anemone comes back out, a Link summons again into the Marincess Coral Triangle. Now this one, I believe, adds a Marincess trap card from the deck to hand. Yes, so the Dave is added back to hand, and then this card is able to search for the trap as well. Dave is going to summon this, which is actually a problem. 2500 defense is like not easy for this deck to get over. They're going to go salvage. They add a bunch of their cards back to hand. Their Coral Triangle, as we said earlier on, would have grabbed the Marincess Wave from the deck. This is what we were saving our Roar for. We want to stop that card, get rid of the triangle, stop it from searching from the trap, and after he's extended so much, our opponent is out of options. Now, we still have a problem. We can't get over that monster. It's got too much defense. So we're going to grab the mirror here from the deck. Whenever it's added to your hand from the deck, you get to summon it basically. Sunlight Wolf comes out. That's going to trigger Gazelle to summon itself. Gazelle send Jackal from deck to grave. Then we're going to link into the Deco Talker Heat Soul just to try and draw an additional card. We're trying to get into anything that may get us over this monster, but we're just sort of struggling at the minute. Will of the Salamangreats then is going to summon 3 Salamangreat monsters from our graveyard. Our timer was running a bit low here at this stage, so we sort of panic summoned another Heat Soul just to see, or sorry, Heat Leo. Gonna grab the Salamangreat Beat Bison, which we can now special summon because we have 3 or more Salamangreats in the graveyard. However, it doesn't do very much for us on this turn, but it's going to be pretty important, trust me. Decode Talker, Heat Soul, pay 1,000 to grab another card. Top decking into Signet Mining, which is pretty useful here on the follow-up. We're just trying to grind out our opponent here. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to muster a lot of attack points. We're probably going to have to summon Decode Talker to the Link Zone in order to benefit from that. The Anemone comes back out, Sea Angel comes back out again, yet again triggering the Spring Girl, searching for cards. It's going to go into the Marincess Crystal Heart. Now again, if you're unaware of how this works, if you use the Crystal Heart in a Link summon for one of your Marincess monsters, so long as your field spell is face up, the monster that was summoned using it is unaffected by card effects. So this thing is immune to everything because of the field spell and the fact that a Crystal Heart was used for its materials. Anemone adds the Coral Triangle back to the extra deck. He sets 3 monsters into his spell and trap card zone as equip spells, and his monster is huge. 4,600 attack and completely unaffected, so that's rough. We're in a bit of a situation here. We're going to need to figure this one out. It's going to banish Marincess from the graveyard to boost itself up and draw 1. And we're going to summon the Foxy, check the top 3 cards of our deck for another Salamangreat card, grab another Foxy, which doesn't do us a ton of favors. We switch our Beat Bison to attack mode. At this point, we sort of messed up the ordering of this. We weren't properly thinking about what we needed to do to win, because again, even at this stage, I didn't know the win condition. And then I realized, this is the game where I realized how powerful the Beat Bison was, and this card was going to be our win condition. Unfortunately, it's not going to be on this turn. We can negate all of his cards, but unfortunately, because we've already used the effect of our Heat Leo, we don't have a way to get over it. But that gave us the idea. We know what we need to do to win this game. We're just dangerously low on life points. We really need to be careful here. Moving into main phase 1, he's going to send from hand to graveyard to summon out one of his banished Marincess monsters. He's going to go for game here. We're going to protect the Beat Bison using our Balinks. We've got 300 life points left. He goes for game. We're going to use the Salamangreat Rage to destroy his monster. We couldn't really afford it swinging into anything else. He's going to summon out another Marincess from deck. Luckily, we are out of the battle phase, so we are safe. We just need to hope that he can't further interrupt us. We have a plan. He's going to summon in the Splash Mage and then into the Marbled Rock here. Marbled Rock is just going to target a Marincess in the graveyard and add it back to hand. So he's got that Sleepy Maiden back in his hand, which he can now summon basically. Which again is a bit of a problem because we have the ability to get over lots of attack points, not lots of defense points. So his the Bubble Reef, again, banishing 1, draw 1 to boost its attack points. We're going to summon out Foxy. Foxy's effect yet again, check the top 3 cards of our deck. We had another Foxy, which is why we now play that at 2. Now we're going to use the effect of Beat Bison. So we're going to return 4 Link monsters from our graveyard back into our extra deck. We're going to negate 4 cards on our opponent's field, negate the field spell and his 2 monsters here. So long as the field spell is no longer active, his monster is no longer protected by the Crystal Heart. So we're going to go into the security token here, Signet Mining, ditch the Foxy to search our deck for the Foul, which will be able to be summoned itself in a second. Link summon in the Balinks. We added our Balinks back into our extra deck. So on the summon of Balinks, we summon Foul, use those 2 to go in the Sunlight Wolf yet again, and that's going to trigger the Sanctuary to basically tribute the Sunlight Wolf for another copy of itself so we can grab a spell or trap card. We're going to grab the Rage here just for some follow-up if we need it, and then we're going to finally Link Summon into Decode Talker Heat Soul. We can finally reduce the attack points of his Great Bubble Reef down to 500, equaling the attack points of our Balinks, and now we can just beat its ass. We swing over it. Our Beat Bison's big enough to get over the Marbled Rock here as well. So this is a major turning point for the duel. Unfortunately, we don't have, because this is what I'm talking about at the start, because we didn't go into Decode Talker Heat Soul here, we don't have the attack points to get over that defense position monster, but we certainly have the resources needed to get past it now that we have our Salamangreat trap card. Target 3 cards in his field, pop them all off of the trap, and this opens up his field. Unless that face down card of his is Mirror Force, there's no chance, and that is game. So honestly, extremely difficult matchup. Barely got through that one, but you can see the resource management, the consistency of the deck. That Beat Bison with a huge negate effect, and this was the duel where I realized how powerful that was. I just misplayed it initially, and then luckily we got another chance because we just happened to have the right cards at the right time. So yes, this was a phenomenal duel. Honestly, I nearly fell out of my chair when I won this one. I expected this to be a guaranteed loss. But no, this was a great game, and it was one of the first games in it. So we made a couple of changes to the deck based off of this. We reduced Salamangreat Will to 2, we reduced Foxy to 2. We got a couple of additional extenders in there. So honestly, very educational duel, not only for me, but I hope you guys can learn something from that as well. That one was a lot of fun. Let's get into game number 2. Alright, getting into game 2. This one's a little bit more straightforward here. We've got our Lady Debug who on summon's going to grab our Gazelle from our deck, and we're going to link summon into the Balinks. Balinks, of course, grabbing the field spell from our deck, the Sanctuary. And we're going to activate Salamangreat Circle. It's going to grab the mirror from our deck. Whenever mirror is added to your hand through anything except drawing it, you get to summon it to the field. And now we're going to use these two to go into the Sunlight Wolf here. We're going to summon Gazelle. We're going to set it in the monster zone here. We're going to send from deck to graveyard. I believe we were going to send the Rage, but unfortunately we get impermed. So, you know, it is what it is, basically. We don't get to send a card from deck to graveyard. Our Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf is still going to grab us the mirror from our graveyard back to our hand. So, you know, some follow-up resources and everything. The Sanctuary then is going to sacrifice our Sunlight Wolf for an additional Sunlight Wolf. And then we're going to use its effect to add the Circle back to our hand, just as some follow-up for next turn. One-time passcode is going to summon out a security token so we can link into Decode Talker Heat Soul. And again, we learned from our last game, we're keeping that in the extra monster zone so we can boost its attack points up. Using Grid Sweeper, we're going into another Balinks. Using these two, we're going into our third Sunlight Wolf for the turn. We're setting up a very powerful Beat Bison if we need it by having all of those monsters in the graveyard. And we're going to set 2 pass. So we don't have the greatest of boards, and we're going against Marincess yet again. He summons his Blue Tang. We decide to let the Blue Tang go through. We learned a little bit about this from the last game. Instead, we're keeping our negate for the Coral Triangle if we need it. Our opponent's going to go into the Blue Slug here, adding a monster from his graveyard, I believe, back to his hand. But the Blue Tang's effect also will activate and basically checks the top 3 cards of his deck. And if there's a water monster among them, you get to add it to your hand. So very straightforward here. And then the Blue Slug, of course, will add a monster from his graveyard back to his hand. Marincess is a very similar deck, and Marincess is a more powerful deck, but at the same time, it also has a lot of very heavy choke points, which Salamangreat doesn't really have a lot of. They're going to go for this field spell here, and then link into the Anemone. He's going to use the effect of the field spell early here, boosting up the Anemone instead of keeping it for later. We decide that this is probably being done for a reason, so we're going to activate our Salamangreat Roar now, negate the Anemone, and we're just going to assume that our opponent has no follow-up here. The Anemone then is going to add the Blue Tang back to his hand from the graveyard, but our opponent has no real way of playing it, except he's got Marincess Dive, which is going to summon Pascala straight from the deck. Marincess Dive is nuts. He's going to go into Splash Mage here. Splash Mage will revive from the graveyard the Pascalis. He's going to summon it Sleepy Maiden from the hand, so he's got all kinds of resources coming out to the field here. He's going to go into the Crystal Heart. Crystal Heart plus the Splash Mage, of course, is going to link up. The Spring Girl's coming out to the field as well. Now we're going to activate the Salamangreat Circle, search our deck for Gazelle, just so we can have it on the follow-up. Again, we sort of understand that this is going to be rough. There's the Coral Triangle that we mentioned before. Probably could have held on to Roar for this, because now he's got that Marincess Wave. But such is life. What are you going to do about it? He's going to go into the Argonaut now. The Argonaut, I believe, is not protected. Is it protected? So if you look through the logs, he used the Crystal Heart in a summon for the Coral Triangle. So the Coral Triangle was protected by the Crystal Heart, but the Argonaut isn't. It is protected, however, by the trap card, the Wave. So basically we just need to sort of change how it is we're looking at it. Now, there is an easy way around that. We're going to draw into Roar, which is a fantastic draw. And this card here, Grid Sweeper, this is your out to the Marincess Wave, which is so funny. Grid Sweeper is really cool. So you can banish this card from your graveyard and banish a Link monster on your field to destroy a card your opponent controls. Now, if anyone who hasn't played or has been only playing against Marincess Wave activates by targeting a face-up monster your opponent controls. Because we don't have any monsters, no target, no protection. it's as easy as that. Grid Sweeper is your out. Like that's so, and that's not just like, that's not a one-off. That's how their deck works. They set up their big Link monster, and then they use their Marincess Wave to negate you and protect their field for the rest of the turn. So if you can deal with their Link monster before they get the chance to activate Wave, they can't do anything. They lose. And I thought that was hilarious. But yes, Grid Sweeper is a phenomenal out. That's why we play it at least one. If you're not playing Grid Sweeper in your free-to-play version of this deck, then you're just not playing this deck. Because Marincess Wave is, of course, the biggest opponent, basically, if you will. It's one of the largest contenders in this particular event, because we're playing this in a Link registration event. But of course, Marincess is just a top tier deck in general at the minute. Well, I mean, it will be. So yes, that's game number 2. Really remember Grid Sweeper. Grid Sweeper is so good for that exact reason, that specific interaction. And you gotta know those little interactions if you're going to go in and you're going to win these games. So just bear that in mind. Let's get into game number 3. Alrighty, getting into game number 3. This time we're going second. The deck, it plays differently going first or second, but we're up against Sky Strikers. They're just going to straight Ray into Shizuku, set 1 pass. So I thought that's a very weak board here from a player. I guess they just mustn't have opened up very well. We're going to top deck into Lady Debug, which is amazing. Lady Debug, of course, grabbing Gazelle. We had the mining in our hand anyway, so it didn't really matter. We're going to link into the Baylink. Baylink grabbing from our deck the Salamangreat Sanctuary. Then we're going to summon out our Salamangreat Mole. Using our Sanctuary now, we're going to link summon... Oh, sorry, well, we'll use Signet Mining first. Discard 1 to grab our Grid Sweeper, just because of the last game was pretty powerful. Sunlight Wolf, then summoning it out to the field, is going to trigger Gazelle to summon itself. Gazelle is going to send from deck to graveyard a Spinny. We were planning on going more on the aggressive this turn, because we're going second. We're going to send Spinny and use it to extend further into more combos. But our opponent is going to banish the Spinny from the graveyard, so that's a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. Now, using the Grid Sweeper, that means we're going to special summon itself out. It can special summon itself so long as you control a field spell, or if your opponent controls a field spell. So considering the ubiquity of Marincess, and then of course your own field spell being Salamangreat Sanctuary, Grid Sweeper is a very easy extender as well as a good pop as well. Going to go into the Heat Soul pay 1,000 to grab the Circle, then Will of the Salamangreat will revive the Sunlight Wolf. Now we're going to link summon into the Salamangreat Heat Leo. Using Heat Leo, we'll summon another Heat Leo so we can use its attack manipulation effect to reduce his Shizuku down to 0 attack and defense. He is, however, he's going to have that DD Crow, which is a fantastic call from our opponent there. He's going to banish the Mole from the graveyard so we have no target for the Heat Leo, so the Shizuku is protected. We're going to go into the Beat Basin here from the Salamangreat Circle, special summon it out to the far zone. We should have summoned it to the zone that Deco Talker points to, but it's not a massive deal. It's only 500 attack points. It's going to summon out the Ray. Ray, of course, going to send itself to the graveyard to summon out the Earth monster, and he's going to basically stop our Decode Talker from attacking. We're going to take this opportunity. We're going to ditch the Heat Leo to ditch the Karina, because in our head, if we can get rid of the Karina now, he may not have a way to go back into his Ray on the following turn, but he does have Engage in his hand, so it's going to force him to basically use his Engage in a certain way. We top deck in the foul off of our Decode Talker, which isn't fantastic. He wipes out our back row with a Harpy's Feather Duster, or at least he tries to. It doesn't go through. There's the Engage we talked about, adding Ray to hand, so it's forcing him to use it for Ray, but he just had 2 of them, which is nuts. Now he's got the maneuver, and suddenly this went from an okay position to an extremely rough position. He's going to ditch 2 of our cards there to the graveyard quite easily. Kagiri's going to make its way out to the field. It's going to add the Engage back to his hand from the graveyard, which he can now activate again. I don't know who designed this card, but they just weren't well at the time. He's going to add Widowmaker and Widow Anchor, and draw 1. Widow Anchor is going to steal our Decode Talker, using which he's going to go into the Access Code Talker. Now our opponent's got 5,300 attack points, but that's not enough for game, so they're going to banish 1, ditch our field spell, and then swing directly. We still got 700 life points. Where there's a will, there is in fact a way. Here we're going to see if we can top deck in the Miracle, and we grab Sanctuary. Quite possibly the worst card we could have top decked. Summon Mirror, summon Foul. We're going to use the Sanctuary now. We're going to link summon into the Sunlight Wolf here. Using the Sanctuary, we're going to have to just use the Sunlight Wolf to go into another copy of itself. We had no extension. We're going to use it to grab a spell or trap card from the graveyard, which would have been probably the Circle, but we get negated. At that point, the Effective Healer seals the deal. There's nothing else really we can do at that stage. We did have something of a plan. It was an ill-conceived plan to start off with, but you know, it is what it is. He pops us, swings directly for game. There's your remaining 700 damage. So unfortunate, it is what it is. Sometimes you just can't win them all, especially considering, so the biggest limitation of a free-to-play deck is of course not having hand traps. So whenever you're playing against not only full power opponents, but full power opponents who have hand traps, naturally you're going to be at a bit of a disadvantage. You can't expect to win every game playing completely free to play, but it has been very, very powerful. So yes, getting away from the final game here, let's get into the deck profile. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. Alrighty, so we're going to go through this now sort of card for card, and we're going to see exactly sort of what we're playing and why. It is a relatively straightforward deck. It is just sort of extending into different plays. If you're going first, you're trying to set up your trap cards. Given that this is the free-to-play version, we don't have the ability to play hand traps or anything. That's the biggest limitation of this deck, because this deck can generate so much card advantage. It benefits so much from having a whole bunch of hand traps thrown in there. So because we're not playing hand traps, we sort of have to compensate by maximizing ourselves on our trap cards and sort of orchestrating our combinations around basically that. So it sort of is a little bit rough at times, but you need to sort of, as long as you know what your win condition is, you'll be able to make it happen. That's the thing. If the deck is capable of doing something, it's capable of doing it at a moment's notice. Its ability to extend, recur, its a sort of revival is amazing. So the deck will always have a play. Again, you saw in the last game, we were playing right up until the very end. So you're going to very consistently have a play, and depending on whether or not you're going first or second is of course going to define that. If you're going first, you're setting up your Sunlight Wolf to grab you a Rage and or a Roar, so you can at least have some form of interruption. If you're going second, you're trying to set up your Heat Leo and dismantle whatever big boss monster they set up using your Decode Talker to boost its attack points up to a pretty high amount, usually around 3,300 to get swinging, and things like your Beat Basin of course to negate their entire field. So the deck has a lot of versatility going both first and second. We're going to go through card for card here. Starting off with Salamangreat Mole, this is just an extender, special summon itself from hand so long as you've got a Link monster in the field. And if you control no monsters, you can banish it from the graveyard, return 5 Salamangreat cards from your deck from your graveyard back to the deck, and then draw 2. So it's sort of like a built-in Pot of Avarice for the deck as well as an extender. That's why we play it at 2. It's actually quite useful. The secondary effect, you don't resolve this an awful lot, but it is definitely possible. You can revive and recur some of your more powerful spells and traps. Mirror is here as a one-off because if it's added to your hand through anything except your normal draw, you get to summon it. So if you need a free extender, search for it off of your debug, your mining, your circle, and then it just automatically summons itself. Bufferlow is your second best normal summon, I would say. Basically, if it leaves the field for if it leaves the field, you discard a Cyberus monster and draw 2. Typically, it'll be for a Link summon, so really straightforward, just Pot of Greed. We got the Foxy on normal summon. Check 3 cards from the top of the deck, and if there's a Salamangreat card in there, add it to your hand. So sort of like a Dark Magic Circle for the deck. We were playing this at 3, we dropped it to 2 because it is a normal summon. We already have 2 normal summons that are way better. So Foxy we did have to drop down. We've got Fox basically, which says if you got 3 or more Salamangreat monsters in your graveyard, send it from your graveyard to your hand to target a Link monster and a spell or trap card, and basically return both. So it sort of is what it is. This card's not all that great, to be perfectly honest, and it is something you can possibly cut. It again can extend under different circumstances, because if a spell or trap card your opponent controls is destroyed, you can special summon it in defense while it's in your graveyard. So it's kind of an extender. It's a useful thing to have on occasion, but it doesn't come up very much. So if you wanted to cut this and just play for a Foxy, that would probably be just as good. But again, that's up to you guys. We're playing Double Gazelle because it's your god card. Basically, it can summon itself automatically when a Salamangreat is sent to the graveyard, and when it's summoned, it'll send a Salamangreat card from deck to graveyard. And notice it says card and not monster, meaning you can send one of your 2 trap cards to later be added to your hand through Sunlight Wolf. So Gazelle is sort of like the center of your going first play. Spinny can summon itself from the graveyard if you control Salamangreat. Pretty simple. Lady Debug on summon, search for any level 3 or lower Cyberus monster, so anything from this guy and before can be searched through Lady Debug, which is great. It's also a light monster, which allows you to go into your Heat Soul easier. Falco, basically send it, whenever it's sent to the graveyard, you can add a Salamangreat target, Salamangreat spell or trap card and set it directly onto your field. So this guy's really good for if you, again, open him up and you go into a link summon. If you've already got one of your cards in your graveyard, you just get to set it straight back to the field, which is amazing. You got the Jaguar, which will, again, return a Salamangreat card in graveyard back to your deck to summon itself, so it's just another extender. Foul, if you summon a Salamangreat, will summon itself in the hand, so it's just another extender. Grid Sweeper, 2 effects. If you saw the second game, if you were paying attention to the gameplay, game number 2 where Grid Sweeper won the whole game, excellent card, really sold me on this guy. But basically he's an extender where if you control a field spell, special summon him, but he also has that really cool effect of banishing himself and a link monster on your field to pop a card your opponent controls, which sounds really bad from like a cost to effect ratio, but you need to consider the greater context of the metagame and how many specific interactions that works into and earns you an advantage out of, particularly Marincess. So this card's amazing. And Beat Basin, this is your big going second boss monster, 2800 attack, it being the strongest thing in your deck except a boosted Decode Talker. And basically you can special summon it by simply by having 3 or more Salamangreat monsters in your graveyard, which you will always have. And you can return fire link monsters from your graveyard back to your extra deck, up to 5, and then negate that many cards on your opponent's field. Actually, is it up to 5? It's not even up to 5, it's as many as you have, and negate up to that many cards on your opponent's field, which is amazing. So you just, I say up to 5 because at one point we returned to 5 to negate 5, which was amazing. So Beat Bison, of course, basically being a full field negate, recurring all of your link monsters back to your extra deck, and then having 2800 attack points. This guy's nuts. You might even want to play this guy at 2 if you want to cut out the Foxer, but Beat Bison is 100% fantastic. We only play it at 1 because it's so easily searchable. Like, this deck can search for anything. It's so consistent. So you only need to play it at 1 because you can search for it, but if you want to play it at 2, go ahead. One-time passcode, scrap a token. The token's a light monster, which makes summoning your Decode Talker Heat Tool a bit easier because it needs different attributes. That's pretty much it. Signet Mining, discard one to search for any of your monsters at all except for your Bison. So this is another phenomenal card. This being printed in this box is so good. I'm salty because I crafted the card, but at the same time, for people who don't have this card, this is amazing. If you want to play any Cyberse deck, this is phenomenal. This card by itself makes this structure deck worth buying 3 times, 100%. You got the Salamangreat Recurrence. I don't think I ever activated this card. Basically, target 2 Salamangreats in your graveyard and add them back to your hand, which is really useful considering how many of your different monsters can summon themselves straight from your hand, which is really cool. Also, if it's set and destroyed, then you get to add a spell or trap card from deck to hand. That's not going to happen very often. I don't think I activated this card a single time. It's cool in theory, but I never had the chance. Double field spell, you saw the field spell pretty much every single turn, searchable through your Bell Links. You can link summon one of your Salamangreats by using a copy of it on the field as material. So you sacrifice a Sunlight Wolf for a Sunlight Wolf, Heat Leo for a Heat Leo, basically. And it also has a secondary effect where if your monster is being attacked, you can pay 1000 life points to reduce one of your link monsters' attack points to 0, and you gain life points equal to its attack points. It doesn't come up very often in this deck, but it is something to be aware of. We got that double Will of the Salamangreat. It's got a once per turn monster reborn effect, or if you have a Salamangreat link monster that was summoned using itself as material, you can send it to the graveyard to summon monsters from the graveyard equal to its link rating. So if I summon Leo using Leo, I can send Salamangreat to the graveyard, Will of the Salamangreat to the graveyard, to summon 3 monsters from the grave, which is amazing. This card is phenomenal. Really is. I played 2 of it because we kept on breaking on 3, so 2 is fine. 3 will Salamangreat Circle. Just search your deck for a Salamangreat card. It's a quick play spell, dead handy. And if you also control Salamangreat that was used itself as material, you can make it unaffected by other monster effects as a secondary thing. That doesn't come up super often, but it is something to be aware of. It definitely is a factor. Lastly, these guys are your win conditions going first. Your Salamangreat, Rage, and Roar. The primary effect of Rage says send a Salamangreat from hand or field to graveyard to destroy a card, which is pretty handy. And the second effect, which is significantly more powerful, if you control a Salamangreat monster that used itself as material, then you can destroy monsters on your opponent's field equal to its link rating. So again, if I go Leo into Leo, I can pop 3 cards at no cost. This is astounding. It's amazing. The main win condition going first, breaking your opponent's boards. And then Roar, basically, if you control a Salamangreat link monster, is an Omni Negate, which is astounding. It can also set itself back from the graveyard if you summon a link monster to the field. So this card is amazing as well. So you've got a whole bunch of pops, you got your Omni Negate, and that's generally how the deck functions. So it is really straightforward. Getting into the extra deck, we're just playing everything that was in the structure deck, plus a wee Lingarebo. 3 Balinks, unsummon, search for your Sanctuary, and you can also banish it from your graveyard to protect your Salamangreat cards. Sunlight Wolf, if something is summoned to a zone of points 2, you can add a fire monster from your graveyard back to hand. And that's really cool because it also interacts with Ash Blossom. So if you were playing Ash Blossom in this deck, Sunlight Wolf could add it back to your hand from the graveyard, which is pretty cool. We're of course not playing it in a free-to-play version, but this guy can, if he is summoned using himself as material, can add a Salamangreat spell or trap card from your graveyard back to your hand. So normally if you're going first, you'll want to summon Gazelle, send a spell or trap card, then go into Sunlight Wolf, and Sunlight Wolf will add the spell or trap that you added back to from your graveyard back to your hand. So that's how you're going to consistently have at least one of your trap cards going first, and then you basically just have to hope you draw the other one or set up an alternative form of play, but you're guaranteed to have at least one of these so long as your plays go through. We've got the Heat Leo, which when it's summoned will target a spell or trap your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck, which is great, honestly. Just, spot back row removal, which is nice. And then if it uses itself as material, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and a monster in your graveyard, and their monster's attack becomes equal to the attack of yours. You can also boost up your monsters from the graveyard. If you have your Beat Bison in the grave, you can target one of your monsters and its attack becomes 2800. So that's also an interaction there as well. So do bear that in mind. It is very versatile in that regard. Lastly, Decode Talker Heat Soul, Cyberse monsters with different attributes, which is why we're playing Lingarebo. It's only here to be another attribute, that's it. Pay 1000 life points, draw a card, it gets boosted by 500 for every thing in one of its arrows. Really straightforward sort of draw power beater, that's pretty much it. But yeah, that's the deck, so it is. So in terms of rigid combo lanes, they don't really exist. What I will say is all of your monsters basically either draw or extend, except for the Beat Bison. But everything here either summons itself or searches for something that summons itself. So all you want to be doing is, if you're going first, you want to summon literally anything. Try to get your Gazelle into your hand. Gazelle's the biggest sort of piece of the puzzle. You want to go into Balinks. Then you want to special summon something from your hand or graveyard. You've got Mole, Spinny, you've got Jaguar, you've got Falco, Foul, you've got so many different cards that can summon themselves, the Grid Sweeper. You want to basically have the Balinks as well as an extender in the field, link those two into your Sunlight Wolf. That will trigger the Gazelle in your hand. Gazelle, of course, searchable through, 9 different cards, plus you've got the 2 copies, plus you've got God knows how much draw power in the form of Foxy searching the top of your deck for it. You've got the Buffalo drawing 2 cards, so you're almost certainly going to have Gazelle. But basically you summon out your Balinks, use an extender to go into the Sunlight Wolf. That triggers Gazelle's effect, as well as the Sunlight Wolf's effect. So Gazelle will summon itself to the field, and then it will send one of your trap cards from the deck to the graveyard. So your Rage or your Roar, depending on which one you have. If you don't have any trap cards in your hand, and you don't know what your opponent is playing yet, it may be smarter to go for Salamangreat Rage, just because that secondary effect is so powerful. But you're going to be summoning Sunlight Wolf using itself as material off of the field spell you searched, off of your Balinks, and that means your Rage is a free pop 2. So you can pop 2 of your opponent's cards, no cost, because of your Sunlight Wolf. So that's why Rage is so powerful in that scenario. And then if you open up your Roar, that's great, that's phenomenal, because you've got an additional Omni Negate there, and it becomes very difficult to break your board. So even just the pop 2 by itself is normally pretty significant, but you've also got the consistency of that Roar. But yes, if I were to make any changes to this list, I would maybe bump Foxy. I would maybe cut Foxer and bump Foxy up just as an additional way, as a last resort way of getting into Gazelle, but it's never an issue. It really never is. I wouldn't lie to you. Gazelle is so consistent, it's not even funny. But yes, if you wanted to do that, you absolutely can, to make it just that tiny little bit more consistent. Yes, that is the deck. It is a whole ton of fun. You don't need to play Lingerubo if you want to keep this pure, completely 100%. I'm still calling it free to play. It's 1SR, guys. Come on, get over yourselves. You'll be fine. You'll live. But yes, that is the deck. Really, honestly, tons of fun. Really was. Really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I was never really a fan of Salamangreats because I'm sure you can tell from my videos, I'm much more of a big monster, big combo sort of guy. So this didn't really appeal to my typical playstyle, but I was shocked by how much I enjoyed it. Coming back with all of these big underdog wins, and I was winning a lot more than I was losing. Trust me, I can only imagine how powerful a full power Salamangreat deck is, and that is what we're going to be doing at some point very soon, because it's gotten me intrigued. I really want to play it now, so I will be building a full power Salamangreat video as well, so stay tuned for that. Get subscribed so you get your notifications whenever that's in, as well as anything else that we upload. You know, it doesn't cost you anything. If you like what you're seeing and you're coming back and seeing more, why not? You're already here. It doesn't cost anything. So yes, that's pretty much everything I have to say on the deck. If you've got any suggestions, questions, I don't know, you want to tell me how your day went, leave it in the comments down below. I get round to everyone who does leave a comment, and I'll see you on the next one.